the man they buried in prison, who returned as their judge. Intro. Narrator. Sometimes, life tests people in ways they never expect. Sometimes, the innocent suffer while the guilty appear untouchable. Power can silence witnesses. Money can twist the law. But there is one force that cannot be controlled forever. Truth, because no matter how deeply a lie is buried, time has a strange way of uncovering it. This is the story of a man whose life was destroyed by greed. A man who was buried inside prison walls for a crime he never committed. Yet destiny had already written another ending. Because the man they buried in prison would one day return with justice. The honest worker, Daniel was known by everyone at the hotel. Not because he was rich, not because he had power, but because he was dependable. He worked at one of the largest luxury hotels in the city, owned by a powerful businessman named Roland Vickers. The hotel welcomed guests from across the world. Politicians, business investors, international travelers. Daniel's job was simple. He repaired broken machines, fixed electrical problems, and helped staff members whenever something went wrong. He worked long hours without complaint. For Daniel, an honest day's work was enough. He believed that honesty would always protect a man. But one night, that belief would be tested. The night everything changed. Late one evening, a wealthy foreign guest checked into the hotel. He carried with him a large amount of money in US dollars. The funds were meant for an important investment meeting the following morning. The guest locked the money safely inside his room and went out for dinner. Everything seemed normal. But while the hotel corridors were quiet, something unexpected happened. The strange encounter. Daniel was repairing a light in the hallway on the guest floor. The corridor was nearly empty. Then he saw someone approaching. It was the director's wife. Daniel was slightly surprised. It was unusual for her to visit guest rooms personally at night. She entered one of the rooms. Daniel assumed it was hotel business. A few minutes later, she came out again. She carried a small box. As she walked past Daniel, she gave him a brief glance. Daniel nodded politely and returned to his work. He did not think much about it, but that small moment would soon change his life forever. The morning panicked. The next morning, chaos erupted at the hotel reception. The foreign guest was furious. A large amount of money had disappeared from his room. Security rushed upstairs. Managers began questioning employees. Roland Vickers quickly realized something terrifying. If the hotel accepted responsibility for the missing money, they would be forced to refund the guest. The amount was enormous. But Roland understood something else. Daniel had been working on that floor the previous night. And Daniel might have seen something dangerous. Roland made a decision. Daniel would become the perfect scapegoat. The arrest. Police officers arrived at the hotel that same morning. They walked directly toward Daniel. Guests watched in shock as the young worker was placed in handcuffs. Daniel kept repeating the same words. "I did not steal anything." But his voice meant nothing against the power of the hotel owner. Money quietly changed hands. Influence moved behind closed doors. The story had already been written. Daniel was charged with theft. The missing money was never recovered. And the hotel announced that the crime had been solved. The guest left the country without receiving his money. The manipulated court. Daniel's family tried desperately to help him. They hired lawyers. Some believed Daniel was innocent, but every attempt to defend him faced strange obstacles. Each time the defense tried to present evidence, the judge would interrupt. This hearing is postponed. Weeks passed. Months passed. Court sessions ended without progress. Eventually, Daniel's family ran out of money. The final hearing lasted only a few minutes. The judge looked down at the file, then spoke one cold word: guilty. Daniel was sent to prison, and the real thief walked free. Life in prison. For many people, prison destroys the spirit. But Daniel chose a different path. Instead of anger, he chose discipline. Inside prison, he began learning everything he could: mechanical repairs, metal welding, electrical systems, machine production. The prison workshop became his classroom. Older inmates taught him skills. Prison technicians showed him how machines worked. Even the guards began to notice something unusual. Daniel could repair almost anything. Machines that others could not fix, Daniel could bring back to life. Years passed, and Daniel became known inside prison as the man who fixes everything. Please press the link button, subscribe, and share it. A strange opportunity. One day, a senior prison officer watched Daniel repairing broken equipment. The officer was impressed. Soon after, a foreign chief judge was scheduled to visit the country. The prison administration needed trusted assistants for security and logistics. The officer recommended Daniel, even though he was still a prisoner. He had earned respect. Daniel was assigned as a security assistant during the visit. The visiting chief judge observed Daniel carefully. Daniel was calm, respectful, intelligent. He did not behave like the criminals the judge had seen before. One evening, the judge asked him a question. "Why are you in prison?" Daniel told his story quietly. The judge listened without interrupting. Something about the story troubled him deeply. Months later, the judge traveled again to Daniel's country for an official conference. During a meeting with the state governor, he mentioned Daniel's case. The governor ordered a review of the court records. Investigators examined the evidence, and what they found shocked them. The case had always been weak. Important facts had been ignored. The trial had been manipulated. Finally, after many years behind bars, Daniel was declared innocent. He was released, a free man, the man who saved the truth. At the hotel, one person had always felt uneasy about the case: an elderly surveillance technician named Mr. Alvarez. Mr. Alvarez understood the hotel's security system better than anyone. He knew something important. The surveillance system had been programmed by the director to automatically delete recordings after a few days. On the night the investigation began, Mr. Alvarez noticed something suspicious. Before security officers arrived, he quickly accessed the surveillance system. He secretly copied part of the video recordings. He saved them inside his private cloud storage account. He also captured screenshots of several key frames. He did this quickly because he suspected the director or someone close to him might erase the recordings. And that is exactly what happened. Shortly after the investigation began, the director announced to security officers that the surveillance system had experienced technical recording problems. Large sections of the footage had already been deleted. But Mr. Alvarez knew the truth. He had saved copies. Years later, when his son began assisting with surveillance maintenance, they discovered something even more disturbing. Parts of the video archives had been manually removed, not automatically deleted, removed intentionally. That discovery made Mr. Alvarez revisit the files he had stored in the cloud. And when he reviewed them carefully, he realized the recordings contained something extremely powerful. Evidence that had been hidden for years. Daniel's second life. A new beginning. Before leaving the country, the chief judge called Daniel aside. He gave him a small loan and a simple message. Use what you have learned. Daniel returned home. He started a small mechanical workshop, using the skills he learned in prison. He began producing industrial machine parts, parts used in large generators, parts used in factories. His designs were strong, reliable, durable. Slowly, customers began to trust his work. Then businesses started placing large orders. Within a few years, Daniel's small workshop grew into a successful manufacturing company. The man once forgotten in prison had built a new life, but fate had one more surprise waiting. The unexpected customer. One day, a wealthy hotel director visited Daniel's factory. His generator had broken down. He needed a special mechanical component. Daniel immediately recognized the man. It was Roland Vickers. But Roland did not recognize Daniel. Daniel said nothing. He simply agreed to manufacture the part. A contract was signed. Payment would be made after installation. The component was delivered. The generator worked perfectly. But 5 days later, another crisis appeared. The sabotage. Late one night, Roland's son secretly removed the generator component. He planned to sell it privately. The next morning, the generator stopped working. Roland immediately blamed Daniel. He refused to pay. Daniel knew his part could not fail, so he reported the matter to the authorities. The case went to court, and that court would finally reveal the truth buried for years. Please press the link button, subscribe, and share it. The final courtroom revelation. The courtroom was tense. Engineers inspected the generator. The component was missing completely. Workers were questioned one by one. Then something unexpected happened. An elderly man slowly stood up. It was Mr. Alvarez. His voice trembled with emotion. I cannot remain silent any longer. He explained everything. How the surveillance system worked. How recordings were automatically deleted. How he secretly captured the footage that night. How he saved it in his cloud storage account. And how he also took screenshots of the images before they could be erased. The courtroom watched in silence as the video was played. For the first time, everyone saw what had happened inside the guest room. A woman entering quietly, opening the guests' belongings, taking the money, then leaving the room with a box. The camera zoomed. The face became clear. It was Roland Vickers' own wife. Gasps filled the courtroom. Even Roland and his wife were stunned. They could not deny the evidence. The screenshots were displayed. The timestamps matched perfectly. Daniel himself stood frozen. He had only known he saw her leaving the room. But now the video revealed everything that had happened inside. For many people in the courtroom, it felt as if an unseen hand had preserved the truth all those years. The work of an invisible being acting before time. One of the lawyers stood up. He recognized Daniel. Years earlier, he had tried to defend him. He brought the old case file before the court. This man was imprisoned for a crime he did not commit. The judge reviewed the evidence. The truth was now undeniable. Justice Returns. The judge studied the evidence carefully. Then he delivered the final verdict. Roland Vickers and his wife were guilty of conspiracy, fraud, and wrongful accusation. Daniel had been imprisoned for a crime he never committed. The verdict came quickly. The director and his wife were sentenced to prison. The director was ordered to pay for the generator parts, pay the whistleblower's salary, provide 6 months advance salary so the worker could find a new job. When Roland begged for mercy, the judge refused. If he could not pay, the hotel would be sold. And that is exactly what happened. The hotel that once symbolized power was sold to pay Daniel. The final message. Narrator. When the judge struck the gavel that day, it was more than a legal decision. It was the sound of truth finally breaking through years of silence. Daniel had lost year. After justice, the weight of truth. Narrator. When the judge struck the gavel, it was not only a legal decision. It was the sound of truth finally breaking through years of silence. For many people in that courtroom, it was the first time they truly understood the cost of injustice. Years of a man's life had been stolen. Years that could never be returned. Yet Daniel stood quietly. There was no anger in his face, no celebration, only a deep calm, because he had learned something during those long years in prison. Hatred destroys the one who carries it, but patience builds strength. The fall of power. Roland Vickers left the courtroom as a broken man. The same man who once walked with pride through the lobby of his luxury hotel now walked surrounded by guards. The court order was clear. His hotel would be sold. His wealth would be used to compensate the man whose life he had destroyed. Within weeks, the hotel that once represented power and prestige was placed on the market. People across the city spoke about the case. But prison was not kind to Roland Vickers. Months later, he fell seriously ill. In the prison, he heard his son had been jailed for crime with other set of boys. And he died behind the same prison walls where Daniel had once suffered. Some said it was karma. Others called it justice. But one thing was certain. The truth had finally been seen. The lesson of the prison years. Prison had taught Daniel something powerful. Life does not always reward honesty immediately. Sometimes the road of truth is long, painfully long, but every experience had shaped him. The prison workshop had given him skills. Hardship had given him patience. Injustice had given him wisdom. Without those years, he might never have discovered the strength within himself. The final fate of Roland Vickers. Meanwhile, Roland Vickers faced the consequences of his actions. Prison is not kind to those who once lived in luxury. The stress of losing everything weighed heavily on him. Within months, his health began to fail. The same prison walls that had once held Daniel now held the man who had sent him there. And eventually, Roland Vickers died in that prison. Not surrounded by wealth, not surrounded by power, but alone with the consequences of his choices. The final message. Narrator. Life is a strange courtroom. Every decision, every action, every lie, every kindness is quietly recorded. Some judgments come quickly, others take years, but eventually, the truth stands up. And when truth speaks, power cannot silence it, because in the end, every deed has a result. Reason Corner. Justice may be delayed, but it is never destroyed. What do you think? Did Roland deserve what happened to him? Tell us your thoughts in the comments. And remember, every deed has a result.